The next series we're covering tonight is the Tom Edison Jr. series, which was written mostly under the pseudonym Philip Reade. That was a house name for writers at Street and Smith, although 2 later entries in the series were written by a Henry Llewellyn Williams Jr., who Jess Nevins describes as, quote, a prolific but untalented writer and editor whose best work was in his translations of Victor Hugo, Dumas Père, Balzac, and others. But this story and the next story can be found on Jess Nevins' website in case you would like to read these. These probably aren't as painful as the first one as they're shorter, but again, still not very good. The first of 11 Edison Jr. stories was Tom Edison Jr.'s Skyscraping Trip, or Over the Wild West Like a Flying Squirrel, which appeared in the Nugget Library number 102 on July 16th of 1891. And like with Reade or the Electric Bob stories, both the Nevins and the Bleiler books describe the plots to a number of other stories in these serials, in case you're wondering what Tom Edison Jr. gets up to after this adventure. But the one we read for tonight was Tom Edison Jr.'s Electric Sea Spider, or The Wizard of the Submarine World, which was published in the Nugget Library number 134 on February 11th of 1892. So this one opens up with a Luke Walters and Master George that are stranded at sea, and this strange creature is approaching. It moves very odd and seems to look like a spider, and unfortunately a typhoon is also approaching. The spider comes close by, and they think that they might be able to ride it out of danger, and as they get on it, they realize it's not a spider at all, but a ship built by somebody.
So this is obviously 20,000 Leagues Under the
Yes.
Sea, like...
Exactly.
Yeah,
this takes a lot from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in a lot of different ways, but this is certainly one bit of it here. They start banging on the surface to get somebody's attention, and are quickly taken on board by the crew. The 2 men are relieved to find the crew are Americans, aside from the second mate named Donnerblitz, who speaks with a thick German accent in vernacular, and Captain Tom welcomes them aboard the Sea Spider. I thought it was interesting that we have a German being portrayed in a positive light. Certainly that would not be the case very shortly.
Not usual in 1892, like around that time. No.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even before the wars broke out, a lot of criticism at the Kaiser, who we'll see in our last story tonight, actually.
Yes.
But the Kaiser has definitely come up before.
Yeah. Well, this was also like not long after this whole like Franco-Prussian War business, and there was like a lot of Americans hanging out in France and like all this kind of stuff going on. Germany had been the bad boy for many decades, before the war started. So, but
no, this Donnerblitz is our goofy comic relief guy who again speaks in ridiculous vernacular.
But we don't get a lot of it actually.
No, we don't.
Like, there's actually very little dialogue in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yeah.
This was an interesting one. In terms of a writing, this one was probably the most interesting. I'm not going to say it was good, but the approach was very different.
Yeah, it was.
And well, I guess we can talk about that more at the end.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel more 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea than Steam Man of the Prairies, and I mean, I think that's kind of obvious why. But he does expand on it in ways that I think could have made this a more decent novel if it was worked on more. I don't know if the Tom Edison Jr. was like the Frank Reads, where they would churn out an entry every 2 weeks. I'm sure a lot of these authors were doing other serials in addition to this. I mean, the Tom Edison Jr. series only had 11 entries, but presumably whoever wrote this was also writing these other dime novels at a very incredible fast pace.
Yeah. Weren't these in New York's 5-cent library?
I think that was Electric Bob.
Oh, definitely Electric Bob was definitely one of them, but I thought there were Tom Edison Jr. books in there too.
There were, but this one I don't think was one of them. I think a lot of these series got published over a number of different publications.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's true enough.
So, yeah, they are welcomed aboard the Sea Spider by Captain Tom. And Tom Edison Jr. is about 20 here. He has a lot of stuff to do, so he delegates the care of George and Walters to the crew of the Sea Spider. They're fed, given rest, and the next day they see the ship, which has a lot of complex machinery in it. The ship mimics the movements of water insects and can move at a rate of 60 miles per hour, as well as dive pretty far below. and is also very heavily armed. Edison fills them in that their mission is to destroy Chinese pirates, and George says that he was captured by the same pirates that Edison is looking for. They are led by a Keong Ho, and his craft is just as marvelous as Edison's is. George tries to describe the vessel to the best of his ability, and Edison sets out to hunt it down. They approach the pirate island, and they have a whole bunch of formidable-looking ships, and Edison is just really stoked to be blowing shit up. It's kind of funny how, like, bloodthirsty Edison is in this story. He just wants to, kill them all and let God sort them out. I think that's pretty much his approach as he goes through here. He just really likes blowing stuff up in his Sea Spider.
He does.
George gives Edison some corrections on his map, and they get closer, and they reach a wall on the outskirts of the pirate town. There's a line about how the Chinese have great faith in walls like the great one they built, but American ingenuity from Tom Edison Jr. can get around that, so they blow a huge hole in the gate with a bomb.
You build a wall, we'll smash him.
Right, exactly. Yeah, this story is very Yellow Peril as far as the anti-Chinese themes go. Nevins and Bleiler both note that it's a pretty early example of that trope, maybe even being one of the first to employ that. You'd obviously see a lot more of this in the coming decades, but it's certainly present here. While it's not as big of a part in the plot as maybe some of the racist stuff was in New Steam Man, it definitely is noticeable.
I think it's innocent, and I don't mean to say that in terms of letting it off the hook, but I think it's more like, oh, these guys are pirates, and the Chinese are very mysterious, so these are like mysterious pirates.
Right, yeah.
There's not a lot of thought put into it, but it's just like kind of, he does say a lot of the time, oh, well, one day even this guy will be forgiven for all his sins, and it's almost suggested that, like, we're here because for some reason the Chinese can't deal with this guy, and they should, but America has to step in.
Right. Yeah.
So that's pretty much what it's about.
Yeah. Again, whole playing empire, and certainly America was expanding its sphere of influence into the Pacific and coming up against powers like China and Japan and Russia in the later decades of the 19th century.
But I'd just like to point out that both this guy and the guy coming up in the next story both make similar claims, but they're both acting completely independently.
Right. Right.
They're not representing anyone, even though they say they are. They're like, we're America.
Right. It's a little ridiculous. So with this big hole now blown in the wall by Edison, they make great haste towards to where they think the prisoners are being held, and they find them in shackles. The pirates are in a state of total confusion as they're being rocked by explosions and machine gun fire. Edison manages to rescue the prisoners, -1 and 3 wounded. And I wasn't clear on the prose here if one of the prisoners was killed or one of Edison's crew was killed. The way it's written I thought was kind of clunky. But regardless, the Sea Spider crew is thanked by the prisoners and then submerges away, stalking out the enemy ships on the surface. At the right time, they surface, and the Spider silently stalks its prey, shelling ships with its pneumatic gun. Another craft can submerge, and they play a cat-and-mouse type game for a while. The Sea Spider strikes and sinks one of the Chinese ships, and one ship tries to get away. But Edison hates cowardice more than anything, so he blows it up with his new dynamite gun in an enormous explosion that rips the ship in two. So with the Navy destroyed, Edison starts shelling the town with a dynamite gun, but isn't satisfied until he destroys Keong Ho's craft. They consult some maps and make some guesses as to where he could be, and again are on the hunt. They eventually find a promising spot that could be the pirate's secret treasure base, and they disembark with their diving suits, compasses, and electric light, and search through the area. They see a strange light approaching and soon realize that it is the Sea Serpent, Keong Ho's craft.
Yeah, I like the way that he describes this ship.
Yeah, the Sea Serpent's cool, I have to say.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
This whole thing has this kind of... It definitely makes me think of future comic book kind of rivalry characters where you've got like the perfectly matched superhero and the villain, where they're like, they both have their thing. and they have to battle it out somehow.
Yeah.
And here, Tom Edison and Kyung Ho have their crafts, and they're like these really special devices that only they really seem to understand.
Right. The sea serpent, in particular, is incredibly sophisticated, possibly even more so than Edison's sea spider. It moves with this like great motion of fins and wings that protrude from it, and it just seems to kind of float through the water and maneuver
He
very
says it
nimbly.
wriggles.
Yeah.
It wriggles like an actual serpent.
Right.
It's very sinuous.
Yeah. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But Edison, of course, wants to do battle with it and leave the treasure for later. So they conceal themselves and observe the pirates loading and unloading the treasure, and they're able to make it back to the sea spider without being seen. The sea spider starts up and proceeds without its lights on or any lighting to be stealthily, and it collides with a swordfish and some sharks that I guess are just there. Their helmsman, whose name is Bob Blinkers, which I thought was a pretty funny name.
Yeah.
But he sees a ship ahead, and as they get closer, it appears to be the sea serpent. So Edison decides to fire a warning shot at it, as that would be the honorable thing to do. He doesn't want to shoot it in the back or take it by surprise or anything like that. He wants to
He's very
slug it out
by honor.
Yeah, slug it out in honorable combat.
Just at one point, he gets pissed off because some pirates like jump into the water and want to escape rather than let themselves die.
Right.
And he thinks they're being cowards, and it like makes him angry.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, man, look, what? I don't know. I've been thinking about what I would do in that situation. I would definitely want to save myself.
Yeah.
Especially, I'm working for some pirate.
Right.
Like, what? Go on.
Yeah, it is kind of bizarre. But the text notes that this is the first submarine battle in history, and it won't be the last with the way things are going.
Yeah.
The sea serpent is incredibly strange and foreign to Edison, so naturally he wants to blow it up and see how it works. He fires from his electric water gun, whatever that is, and the sea serpent wakes up, and it uses a spiral principle of propulsion, firing back at Edison. Fortunately, not doing any damage. The sea serpent tries to ram Edison, but they're able to get out of the way in time, and it tries several other attacks, and Edison is playing defense and observing the capabilities of the sea serpent to see what it can do. And when it is time to strike, Edison fires at the electric light on the sea serpent's hull, putting it out. The shot also appears to damage its navigation system as it's moving strangely, and Edison has a steel claw come out of the spider, which grabs the tail of the sea serpent and crushes it, rendering it dead in the water. Edison moves the sea spider back in case Kyung Ho rigged a trap or something, and decides the best way to handle is them disembarking and boarding it, blowing it up after they're done checking it out. George is able to get them in the ship, but it appears that it's been deserted already, and as they're entering, a bomb goes off. Explosion is muffled by the water that they had entered the craft. And our heroes are untouched, but Edison is scoping out the ship. It is indeed based on the spiral principle, like a rifle's bullet would pass through a barrel of a gun. They set off a bomb to explode within 10 minutes, but the vessel's door has been closed shut, trapping them in. And in this massive adrenaline rush, Edison just rips the door off, and they're able to get out of the ship, getting as far away as possible, and throwing themselves on the floor of the sea when the explosion goes off. The sea serpent collapses in the explosion, and Edison feels duty-bound to seize all the pirates' treasure because, of course, George cautions him to be wary of Kyung Ho, as he might have some tricks up his sleeve still. Edison begins unloading the treasure, and Kyung Ho's men begin to engage Edison in hand-to-hand combat in the water. So it's like this giant thunderball-type underwater battle.
Yeah.
Kyung Ho looks huge, and he shoots one of Edison's men. Edison shoots the gun out of his hand, and the two groups start to exchange fire. The Americans, of course, are winning, and Edison and Kyung Ho close in on one another and engage each other face to face. Edison sends an electric shock through his armor that stuns Kyung Ho, who turns to retreat. And Edison has no intention of letting him go and gives chase, but his lamp starts to dim, and he gets surrounded by pirates. Edison shoots two of them, but his gun runs out of power, and George saves the day at the last minute by giving Edison a charged gun. So Edison blasts another one, and Kyung Ho jumps on him, making Edison drop his gun, but George picks it up and then kills Kyung Ho. and the two of them get back on board the Sea Spider together. And Edison realizes that George is his cousin Georgie Edison, who had been concealing her gender the whole time, and asks Edison to keep it a secret. So this bizarre twist at the end that just comes out of nowhere. And after this reveal, they go back to American waters, and Edison is free to get into his next adventure.
Yeah.
And that's that.
This one, I don't know. In terms of the writing, like I said, I think it was interesting. It's the only thing we've seen probably... Okay, maybe it's the second example of present tense that we've seen on the podcast so far. We've not seen much that's written in this vein.
Right.
The whole thing is written in the present tense. Unlike all the other Edisonauts, I think, maybe with the exception of the next one, because I think that's a little bit of a different case. Mm-hmm. But there seems to be a very different, conscious effort to be a little bit different. There's not a lot of dialogue. The paragraphs are longer. There just seems more effort to give it a little bit of an extra something. And I think that should count for something. I mean, I didn't really enjoy this, but at the same time, it did feel like it was written by somebody who at least knew how to construct sentences and make them work. Right. Now, I still feel like there wasn't a lot of supervision in the editorial department. Was probably not happening. Yeah. Right? But again, we're looking at something that was probably rushed off by a company that sold it for just a few cents in the train stations or wherever. Yeah. And read once and destroy kind of thing.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And for that, it really wasn't too bad.
No. This was probably my favorite out of the first three stories that we read here. And you could do a whole lot worse for a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ripoff.
Yeah. It was very superficial 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ripoff.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But it also didn't steal directly from Jules Verne.
Right.
Which some of the other ripoffs did.
Yeah. But I mean, the craft is very similar to the Nautilus. I mean, the shape of it aside, it does a lot of the same stuff. Yeah. And it's, your cool super submarine.
He has a bit more fancy weaponry, though.
Yeah.
And he's very patriotic.
Right, which Nemo definitely was not.
Right. Nemo was the opposite of that. Nemo seemed to spurn nationalism, utterly, pretty much.
Right. Which is, I guess, one interesting thing that a lot of these are Jules Verne knockoffs in some way, but Verne expresses pretty much the opposite sentiment in all of his works.
Yeah. I mean, Captain Nemo was definitely... He seemed to have some people that he knew that could sort of on his side, but maybe they were like anarchists or something. We never really learned. But he's definitely an independent operator. He doesn't claim to be aligned with anyone, especially not a country.
Yeah.
Then again, I think that was something that might have been a little bit lost on some of Verne's early audience in the English-speaking world.
Right.
I certainly don't remember that aspect of the novel very much from the first time that I read it.
And I think that's one of the ones that got cut the most.
Yeah, I mean, granted, I was very young.
Right.
But the thing is, I do remember enjoying it, and I do remember liking it. It felt like there was a lot less to it than when I read it this time. But that could also be me. And I think in order to figure that out, I would have to, I don't even know which translation I read now, so...
Yeah, probably be impossible to find out.
I mean, I guess we could go back to some of the really old ones.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity sometime just to see, but I don't know. We probably won't. Yeah. But I might one day, just for the hell of it, just to see exactly what they did do to Verne, for real.
Butcher might document it somewhere. I'm not entirely sure if he does like a side-by-side compare.
Yeah, there's a few characters in this, but they're not really gone into, so...
Right.
I think by consequence, the gender swap thing isn't as... I don't know, it isn't as meaningful as it could be.
No.
It's just not, it doesn't really serve anything. I barely remember who George was.
Yeah, George is like this flat background character the whole time, even though she is the main character from the beginning. Once they get on board the Sea Spider...
Yeah, you notice that once they get on board, the other guy is not even mentioned?
Yeah.
What was his name even? Luke or something?
Yeah. Walters? Luke Walters?
Walters, yeah. He totally disappears.
Yeah.
Again, this feels like something that was done by somebody who knew what he was doing, but needed to make a couple bucks.
Right.
And there wasn't time to think about it that much, or to go over it again, or to flesh out details like the characters and stuff. That just wasn't important to him.
Yeah.
it's fine. The portrayal of the Chinese pirates, again, like, they don't get really any character, they don't get any real motivations, but at the same time, it's interesting that he has that Orientalist kind of thing going on, where he doesn't condemn the culture. In fact, he seems, like, strangely fascinated by it. And it's almost a little bit like, it's a little bit ridiculous. It's very condescending, actually.
Right.
But it's more condescending than outright, like, destructive. Or, the pirates could have been not Chinese.
Right.
I guess that wouldn't have made a huge difference to the story. But at the same time, I think he just wanted to add that element of, this is like, these are not your ordinary pirates.
Right.
There's something a little bit exotic and different. They're celestial.
Yeah. The mysterious other. Yeah.
Yeah, used many times.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So, it's strange. I didn't really understand the racist connotations of that word till somewhat recently.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I just thought, I don't really get that. It's just that I guess when I first learned the word, it was probably in connection with the Doctor Who story, The Celestial Toymaker.
Right.
And I was probably like 7 or 8 years old at the time, and I remember putting it on a spelling list. And I never thought anything of it for the longest time. And then people were saying, well, it reminds them of 19th century attitudes towards Asian peoples.
Right.
And like, it's got that kind of, I guess, exotic fascination, also a little bit of a condescension to it, like the old celestial civilization kind of thing. And I don't know, it's interesting. But yeah, that's the word he uses most often, which is certainly better than the words used in the new Steam Man, which we didn't mention, but we don't need to mention them. There's
you can imagine
really bad racial slurs that are used like all over it.
Yeah. Right.
So there's nothing like that here. And that's kind of nice.
It is, yeah. I mean, even though the Yellow Peril stuff is present, I think it's probably the least racist out of the first 3 that we covered.
Oh, yeah. No, interestingly, though, this is a lot less racist than the character that, I guess we're going to say Kyang Ho. I pronounced it Kyang Ho earlier. I think it's just a nonsense. Like, I don't think it really means anything. So, but we'll say Kyang Ho. He reminded me of definitely the conception of Fu Manchu from over 25 years later, I think. Yeah. And Fu Manchu was a character that also, like Kyang Ho, because it said at one point that he was educated in the West, and he went to prestigious Western universities, and that's where he first started to amass a lot of his knowledge.
Right.
And that is something that is connected intimately with the Fu Manchu character as well. Sax Rohmer does sort of go on about that a bit, and he's kind of like implying that, this is a monster from the mysterious Orient, but we also created this monster kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's as much of that here, because he doesn't really have time to go into it.
No, it is pretty short. This is roughly half the length of New Steam Man. So it is a very brief novel. I think it's like 17,000 words or so. They were billed as novels, but it really is like a long short story, short novella, kind of along that borderline.
Yeah, I don't know. It was pretty short.
Yeah.
It could have been longer, but then I probably would have not. I enjoyed this a little bit. I probably wouldn't have at all if it was longer, because it did have a lot of imperfections to it. It was, it did need more. It felt almost sometimes like a summary of a story rather than a story itself.
It did. Yeah.
So, but I don't know. Potentially interesting relationship between Tom Edison and Kyang Ho. I mean, Tom Edison was pretty ruthless.
Yeah.
So it would have been kind of interesting to like kind of go back and forth chapters and have some Kyang Ho perspective chapters.
Right.
Because he's pretty ruthless too, presumably,
for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So it would have just been nice to see more of that. I guess I'm thinking of the kind of like future that you'd see in comic books and stuff like that, where it's like you do focus a little bit on the villain and his motivations and stuff. And,
definitely.
And you see also the fact that hero and antagonist are sort of two sides of the same coin kind of thing.
Yeah, almost equal in powers, both in their engineering prowess and their physical strength.
Yeah. And there was a little bit of that here. And I kind of liked whoever the author was, I kind of liked what he was almost aiming at and didn't quite get to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
Well, I don't really have anything else to say about it, though.
No, I mean, it's okay. Again, it's probably my favorite out of the first 3 we've done. I guess one interesting thing is the real-life Thomas Edison Jr.
Yeah, so let's talk about him for a moment.
So he became a bit of a problem for his father. Thomas Edison Jr. started using the Edison name to sell basically snake oil products and other fraudulent medicinal cures.
I got this great idea for a sea spider for you.
Yeah, right. But Edison Sr. was not pleased about this and had to take Edison Jr. to court to actually stop him from using the Edison name. And Edison Sr. agreed to pay Edison Jr. an allowance so he wouldn't use it.
Boy, you're fucking up my brand name with all these dime novels.
Yeah. So, yeah, interesting contrast between the real-life Edison Jr. and the one of this novel.
Yeah. All right, well, let's see what our next inventor genius is going to be like, shall we?
All right.
So here's a title that's fun to say. Electric Bob's Big Black Ostrich. And we think this was written by somebody named Robert Toombs. I'm not really sure. I think it was either published under no name or anonymously or something.
Bleiler or Nevins say that they think Toombs was a real person, but there's absolutely no information whatsoever on his life other than the fact that...
Yeah, I'm just wondering what the byline was on this. I think it just says, by the writer of Electric Bob. I think that's literally all it says. This is part of the 5-cent library, which was published by Street and Smith Publications. And Street and Smith is a name that had, I think, maybe more prestigious and more worth noting, especially in our genre, than something like Frank Tuzzi's, whatever they were called.
Yeah, the Frank Reade stuff, yeah.
The organization, or even the Stratemeyer organization, for instance, as prolific as they were. Street and Smith was a huge publisher of pulp magazines, and they continued for many decades. And in fact, they are the publisher of Astounding Magazine and Unknown Magazine starting in the 1930s. They also birthed many popular pulp characters. I believe The Shadow was born in their pages, and of course became a famous radio series and a lot of other things too. A legacy that lasted for many decades, right up till the 1990s. So Street and Smith is an important player in this field. And this is part of their 5-cent library. There are many, many great titles in here. Oh, let's see. What have we got here in the 5-cent library? The New York 5-cent library, published by Street and Smith. These were issued every Saturday, apparently. So one every week of the 5-cent library. All apparently written by different people, but the thing is, when you look at their names, you can tell that they're pseudonyms.
Yeah.
They feel like they're pseudonyms. The first one was John L. Jr., The Young Knocker Outer, or Fighting for Fortune, by Billy Madden. And we also got O'Brien, the Bunko King, or Nat Woods, Capture of an All-Around Crook, by the author of Nat Woods. And there's other great titles here too. They're all very lurid and pretty fun.
Yeah. Couple Tom Edison Jr. stories. So there's Tom Edison Jr. in Australia.
Oh yeah.
There's also another hero, Telegraph Tom.
Telegraph Tom, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anything about him. He's not mentioned
Telegraph
in the library.
Tom at Work.
Yeah.
Or the Young Desperado's Oath, by W.M. Murray. He apparently was the writer of the Telegraph Tom stories. But
yeah.
Again, we got no evidence that it's a real person. I mean, but there's also Jim Bowie.
Mm-hmm.
That's obviously a pseudonym,
right?
And we get him. Jim Bowie is the writer of the Deadshot Dave series.
Yeah.
So we get Deadshot Dave, the nerviest sport on record, or the Card Wizard of the Mississippi. This is just outrageous. We got Pawnee Bill. There's another one.
Yeah.
I guess the hero of Oklahoma, or the fugitive of Refuge Ranch. Harry Hart was apparently the writer of those. So we move back and forth between all these different guys. Electric Bob is one of the heroes in this series. There are apparently 5 Electric Bob stories, and I believe that this one is the second one. It follows a story called Electric Bob and the Big Alligator or something.
The White Alligator.
The White Alligator. Okay. This is a black ostrich, and that's a white alligator. Okay,
right.
Great.
Looks like another treasure hunt in that one, too, as the subtitle is Hunting for Confederate Treasure in the Mississippi River.
Yeah, and the subtitle of this one is Lost in the Desert or something?
Lost in the Desert, yeah. The titles are incredibly cumbersome, too.
Yeah, but I did enjoy reading through those. There's some... I don't think I need to read them. I just need to read the titles. They're great in their own right.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need to go further with it, but I just like... I especially like the Young Knocker Outer. That's pretty good. And Deadshot Dave. Kind of like to know about him kind of thing.
I'd imagine it's like a Western type of thing.
Oh, yeah. So, Electric Bob's hanging out at a boarding house in California on the coast with some wannabe gold prospectors. Now, in the first story with the white alligator, he's apparently 10 years old. I think he's older than that in here.
He seems to be, but again, it's really hard to tell. I don't think he's really described at all, but it just seems odd that like a 10-year-old kid would be hanging out with like all these.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be hanging out with a bunch of grizzled old miners and getting like respect, and I don't know. It's very strange.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe a bunch of years have passed or something. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
But there's this old fellow named Inyo shows something about the peg leg. What is the peg leg, you asked? Well, it's a legend out west, and before long, old Inyo and young Bob have agreed to find the peg leg. It's an old mine to the south, established by one Pegleg Smith and subsequently lost. There are supposedly 3 hills just full of gold nuggets. Inyo opines that the mine is impossible to reach by most because of the intense heat and the rattlesnakes and all kinds of perils. But he won't get no flying machine. So Bob, watching some of the desert birds pass, decides, hey, how about an electric ostrich? That'll do.
That's just the thing we need.
That's just the thing we need. It sounds mighty fine.
Yeah.
So let's go study some ostrich anatomy, and that's exactly what they do. Having recently been successful with the white alligator and being generally known for as the inventor of all these wild animal machines, he approaches the ostrich problem with lots of confidence and vigor. And he makes many startling discoveries about ostriches, I guess. And he doesn't even have to vivisect any. So that's pretty great.
Yeah.
Bob's not going to build the ostrich himself. He's got all these factories at his beck and call, and he's very modern like that. Presumably, he's sort of one of the offspring of the Edison R&D lab, I guess.
Right, yeah. He seems to be in contact with all these machine works places all over and just like puts in mail orders and...
Yeah, he puts in all these plans and they just sort of stop doing what they're doing and make Bob's stuff.
Yeah, right.
So, but they also invite him over to supervise the process. And he goes, apparently with some grudging and reluctance, which is surprising and kind of funny. It's like, oh, these boys don't know what they're doing. They want me to supervise their machine making. What?
Right.
I have better things to do, like bird watching.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, old Inyo is anxious, and he wants them to hurry, because he's getting not younger fast.
Right.
And they have rivals now, because for some reason, Inyo, I guess, has been telling everybody about what they're doing. So everybody knows, which is like the most baffling thing. I mean, if you had this secret. I mean, I guess, I don't know. He was, in the beginning, he was telling all the miners about it, but they obviously didn't seem to believe him. But I guess then when he started hanging out with Electric Bob, then, like, all bets were off kind of thing, you know? It's, he's hanging out with Electric Bob now. They're up to something.
Right.
So they make the ostrich at the factory and ship it back in parts. And Bob has to assemble it. And it's got fine steel legs, plate steel and hardwood body, aluminum wings and tail. But it still can't fly. And it can make a speed of up to 40 miles per hour on good terrain, though.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah. It has batteries for balls.
Yeah.
The batteries are like between its legs.
Right.
Big batteries. And It's 30 feet tall.
It's enormous, yeah.
It's a giant ostrich.
Yeah.
It comes with a machine gun that's in its throat.
Yeah.
It's just, and there's a camera built in as well.
Right. So you could kill somebody and take their picture at the same time.
That's right. And Ennio says that, and Bob's like, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
What a great idea. So they go see Ennio's friend Skip, who happens to edit a newspaper, which sounds pretty convenient, but doesn't really come to anything. So it turns out that he has the original map drawn by Pegleg Smith himself. He got it off a dying man, which is very ominous. And I think the other map that Ennio has also came from a dying man.
Right. Not a very good mortality rate associated with this mine's legend.
People may return from the place, but they die soon afterwards, which is like, it's funny. It made me think, maybe there's some, uranium down there as well, and they're all getting, it's kind of, there are a lot of hints at things in this that didn't happen, so... Yeah. But yeah, it's almost as if there's radioactive material down there with the gold, which is apparently piled high in the open on these there hills.
Right.
And Skip tells them about a vision he had of a dead fellow, this ghostly skeletal thing, followed by a even more desiccated skeleton creature. And this thing that he saw was, I guess, the skeleton of the man that he had gotten the map from, who he apparently was very nice to in his dying moments. So I guess this guy came back from the dead to sort of, do him a good deed and tell him not to find the mine. And that's enough for him. He's given up on it entirely. He's he just gives Electric Bob the map. And yeah, so it was a funny thing. There's foreshadowing at the end of every chapter, sort of hinting at something bad that's going to happen next. But it's actually a really fun technique sometimes. I've seen A.E. Van Vogt do this really well.
Yeah.
But this guy, sometimes it's not so good.
No.
Because here, Craig Skip is yeah, that's enough for me. I gave up on this and I have no interest anymore. Here's the map. And then at the end of the chapter it says, there were times when they almost wished they had given up.
Right.
And it's but they never quite wished it. It never got so bad that it was actually worth them that they actually would give up. So I guess the hint is, there's not really going to be much danger in this book.
Right.
Sort of self-defeating. So at this point, they start having fun and testing the electric ostrich. So they pass flying through a village, setting the residents scurrying indoors like frightened animals. And they decide to race a train.
This part's pretty funny.
They manage to push the ostrich up to 81 miles an hour.
Pretty incredible, I have to say.
And yeah, it's pretty crazy.
30-foot metal ostrich running down the road at 80 miles an hour. It's
yeah. So they pass through all these places and they cause destruction in their wake. Yeah. They run over a dog and then they knock over a clothesline in that order. We don't know how the dog owner feels, but the train conductor and engineer are really upset until they see the stars and stripes and they decide that everything is okay. And then they shout out a hail when the ostrich fires off its machine guns, because the ostrich kind of comes to a rest and the train is far behind. And finally they see the train coming and Bob's like, let's test the machine gun too.
Yeah.
And he starts firing bullets into the air and all the people on the train are like, hail! Hail! And then they hunt for rabbits. And I thought they was going to shoot them, but no. The ostrich just kicks them to death.
Yeah, this is really nasty spur on its leg.
Yeah,
so it just impales the
rabbit.
rabbit.
It was so funny because that didn't get described till then.
Yeah.
So it's I kind of figured maybe after he had the ostrich kick the rabbits to death, but it was just I wasn't expecting that. I thought, they're just gonna take their rifles and shoot some rabbits, I guess. Good luck to them, I guess.
Right.
But no, the ostrich just kicks them, and then the spur on the foot impales the rabbits. And then he pushes a lever, and the leg goes up into the air, and he just plucks the dead rabbit off the thing. It's probably disgusting and all, his guts coming out and stuff. But
I would imagine so. I mean, getting kicked by these legs have to be 15 feet high or something like that? I can't imagine what there'd be left of the rabbit after that.
Yeah, pretty much. It's at this point we get our friend racism starting to rear its head, where we have Inyo saying, wow, this thing would do a lot of good against some Indians.
Right.
And Bob says, yes, I was thinking of exactly that. Indians or rascally whites.
Yeah.
When I made it. And Inyo takes them to, he knows all these things because he's like the wise old man of the West, and he knows all these secrets and strange places. So he takes them to this new lake that's in a valley, and it's this like new, I guess, manifold, like it's somehow the land is pulling in all the water from the surrounding regions. And it's kind of strange the way he describes it. There's a little bit of that like sense of awe and wonder a little bit, and it's kind of creeping in. So it's kind of nice. They say a couple of times, oh, it's just a strange land, right? And it's just like, yeah, I don't know. There's a bit of feeling there. I mean, it's kind of not that well expressed and a bit repetitive, but there's no fish in it, probably. But there are fish that can be dug up out of the ground. And Inyo does this, and they're good. Again, it's a strange land.
Yeah.
And they go to sleep on top of the Ostrich, which they've now named the Desert Flyer. And they're being crept up on by a sneaky band of natives. Yep. These guys are Mojaves, he says. And we learn that Indians never snore, so the idea of snoring humans inside an ostrich is especially strange. So the sleeping bird seems to be making a terrible noise. Nevertheless, they try to lasso the thing and instantly are stuck to the bird by an electric current. And they start dancing in electrified frenzy.
Again, very 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yep, yeah. Also reminded me of that Doctor Who story where these guys try to steal John Pertwee's car, and he turns on this device and they get like stuck to the car. So, Bob finally turns off the current, and the natives extricate themselves in a rather undignified pile, and they make haste out of there. And the Ostrich continues to the southeast, bound for the Colorado River, I think. So they find some skeletal remains with gold on them, and they decide that they must have been coming from the Peg Leg!
Right.
How they reach this conclusion, I'm not sure, because they still seem quite a ways away from it. But they decide to camp out on an island, and the Ostrich goes into the shallow water, wings down, with the men riding on top of it. So they make camp, but suddenly some Mexicans appear and steal Inyo. And they drag him into their boat, and they make off, with Ostrich in hot pursuit. It seems to be doing fine in the water, but then there's a new Steam Man flashback as something thrilling happens, or we are told that it is about to happen. Anyway, and the Ostrich suddenly stops, and it starts going backwards. What the hell's going on? It's being dragged by a giant crocodile. Well, Bob makes short work of him with the machine gun, which, by the way, is an awesome thing with like 25 Winchester cartridges jammed into the barrel of this crank-powered Gatling gun, and it's in the gizzard of the bird. So Bob just gets behind the crank and turns the crank, and it spits bullets and annihilation. But now he's lost Inyo, even though the crocodile's dead, and he can't see the Mexican's boat anymore. And by the time he finds it somewhere on the east bank, it's been sort of abandoned, with Inyo being taken on a bigger boat to San Felipe. And even though the name of this chapter is the Mexican Outlaws, the outlaws from Mexico seem to be interested in practicing the law of Mexico, which is the thing. They want to try to have the two men taken to trial for entering Mexican territory with guns.
Yeah, which I guess seems kind of reasonable. I mean, this huge, giant ostrich with a crank-powered machine gun is coming in, causing who knows what problems.
Well, yeah, for sure, yeah. It's very odd. So I can't quite figure this out, though. Are they actually in Mexico in this part?
I think so. Though I was kind of unclear on the geography myself.
Yeah, I know it starts out in Southern California, and I guess they're continuing south. So I guess then the mine must be in Mexican territory. I don't know.
I think so.
Yeah, we're a little unclear. Sorry, guys. But Bill manages to, Inyo, that is, Inyo, his first name is Bill. It's mentioned a couple times. I forgot to mention it. But he manages to scrawl a letter, and he leaves it in the boat. And the ostrich catches up to the bigger boat, and it's no match for the bird. The ostrich is just floating on the water now, I guess. And Enio is yelling at Bob to kill them all. He calls them yaller bastards. Nevertheless, when there is wholesale slaughter, both men feel bad.
Yeah.
So that's nice, I guess. And the Mexican captain grovels, and he agrees to surrender. And they get off with a warning from Bob to let Americans alone when they are not being troublesome. So I guess once they got to Mexico, they didn't run over any dogs.
I guess not.
Probably only okay to do that in America,
right?
With your ostriches,
yeah.
Right? I don't know. I wouldn't know, but I'm guessing. They depart with an adios, and Enio thinks that everyone is against them, and they don't have enough money to justify what they've done. Wow, Enio's actually thinking. So he basically feels that he's going to end up a big old pile of them bones. And indeed, death seems to lurk everywhere. And that is the ominous preamble to the next chapter. Because now there's an adventure with some Pan-American bandits.
Yeah.
And these are an assortment of bandits that seem to come from everywhere. So, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Bob's lost, and Enio has to run the ostrich now. And there's apparently a fight off-screen with a mountain lion that Bob has. There's, like, bits of things hanging everywhere, like clothes and bloody rags and stuff. It's not a very good sign.
Yeah, I like this part a lot. It feels like Electric Bob is actually in danger here. You know, Enio has no idea where he is, and he sees, like, Bob's broken rifle on the ground near, like, some blood spatterings, so it doesn't look good for Electric Bob. Yeah.
Yeah. But he does eventually find Bob, and Bob tells him this crazy story about how he shot a mountain lion, but was then attacked and dragged away by his mate. And that's like, I don't know, mountain lions are not that big, I don't think.
The mountain lion would definitely hurt you pretty bad, I think. Yeah. Especially if it got the jump on you and you only had a rifle that could fire one shot.
Well, I'm sure they could really hurt you, but I'm just not sure they could, like, drag a full-grown man.
Oh, yeah, that probably not.
Yeah, I don't know. But that's cool. I like a good big cat.
Yeah,
story.
Right.
It's good, right? So, but then suddenly they see this weird camel thing with a skeletal rider come out and crush the lioness. So I guess the camel is more formidable.
Yeah, it seems that way.
I mean, it seems like a supernatural thing, so I guess that's how we're going to take it for now.
Right.
So Enio goes white and says, it's the Red Devil, and they're doomed. Just after seeing a wrecked old ship stuck in a quagmire, they're attacked by Apaches, and the machine gun won't fire. And Enio complains about the Red Devil and wants to go home, and the ostrich can't run away either. There's an overheat and a burnt-out wire. Doom! They do notice, though, that the so-called Red Devil is shod with irons, so there must be something artificial about it, maybe. That was what I was thinking, anyway. I was thinking maybe it was like a rival to the ostrich, like kind of with the sea spider.
Right,
but,
yeah.
But no, it's nothing like that.
No.
We will spoil it when we spoil it, but Enio's been using his rifle, and they're dealing with the Apaches now, and they find out that the chief of the Apaches wearing armor, and their bullets are not hitting him. But it's actually done with a little bit of creepiness, because like he seems like this huge, invulnerable person.
Right.
For some reason, though, there's a weird thing about him. Is like the other guys are Indian, but he's black.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was weird. And of course, they had to use the N-word.
Right, they do. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. So even Bob was getting superstitious at this point. And the Apaches, though, the Red Devil shows up, and the Apaches don't like him. And it's frightening, and it just walks casually over everyone and everything. And Bob figures out that he can hit the chief in the head and kill him. So then the Apaches slip away, defeated.
Like blows his head clean off.
Yeah. It's a nice shot there. The natives were dragging the ostrich.
Yeah. And
this is when, for some reason, Bob assumed they were being dragged towards a mine, and I really didn't follow why he would assume that.
Yeah, right.
It turns out that there is maybe a reason, but Bob doesn't know anything about that yet. The reason being that there's an Indian, burial ground But why they would take him there, why they would take the Ostrich there, I have no idea. And why Bob would think that, I don't know. The Ostrich malfunctioned, so it took Bob a while to fix it. And when he fixed it, the Red Devil showed up. So now they can follow the Red Devil. And they do, and he's leading them to the south. Since he seems to be inextricably linked to this mine for some reason, I guess they just sort of assume that he'll take them somewhere good. Now the country is full of hills, and suddenly the Red Devil seems to be swallowed up by the ground. But there, before them, are the 3 hills. Now, Ennio don't want to go home. He has the lust upon him. He won't eat or sleep, and Bob has to be pretty patient with him. And Bob finds a cave. It's apparently the lair of the Red Devil, and this is where there's a burial chamber full of old dusty skeletons.
Yeah.
They decide to violate the grave site and they dig a hole somewhere around that cave, and they bury 10,000 pounds of gold in there.
Seems like it would take quite a while to do.
It's a lot. But it's just lying there. So, and they've been lifting it, just carrying it by hand, and Ennio's like rolling around in it practically. It's ridiculous.
Right.
And they set out for San Bernardino, where I guess they're gonna sell. I don't know. They're gonna trade it in or something, or I don't know. Whatever you're supposed to do with all that gold, buy stuff. I guess Ennio contemplates what he'll do with his new wealth, including setting up a factory for Bob. But Bob seems to be kind of rich anyway. And it turns out Ennio has a sweetheart living out east somewhere, and he's going to write her a letter and tell her he's rich. And Bob says he's rich enough that he can avoid the high telegraph rates, which I thought was a cool joke that sort of tied in with last month's episode.
Yeah.
It's kind of neat. And they run into a decimated party, and Ennio decides that it's the mining party that set out from San Diego before they did. And one of the things he was so anxious about. And Ennio knows all of them, and they're all dead. And they don't know what happens. And I don't think we ever really find out.
No, I don't think so either.
Nope. But they have an idyllic supper scene. They're just sort of hanging out and relaxing and eating venison and toast and drinking coffee. But then the devil returns again and manages to steal the Ostrich. And it has all their gold on it.
Yeah.
So here, now the devil is dragging the Ostrich, I guess. And I guess it's very light, made of this lightweight aluminum material mostly.
Well, I think it rubs against the Ostrich and then accidentally starts the starting mechanism, and the Ostrich kind of runs off by itself.
Guess so. Suddenly it runs into a tree, though, and it's broken.
Yeah.
The dog and the clothesline and all those other things didn't damage it, but this damn palm tree, man, that was easy. So the Red Devil turns out to be... Okay, I'm going to spoil it now, guys. The one ominous, foreboding thing in this book turns out to be nothing more than a poor, sick, sad camel with a skeleton of a U.S. soldier on it. And the guy was a deserter, and he was carrying dispatches when he found the mine and started hoarding gold in the hold of the lost ship they found earlier. And he wrote this note confessing all this, which happens to be on him right now.
Yeah.
And he's been sitting on the camel all this time, just sort of rotting away, I guess.
There's $1 million in gold with this ship, so some bonus treasure for Electric Bob and Ennio to come back to later.
Yeah, it's for the people that want to give up.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. Maybe, the bonus treasure. So they do make it back to San Bernardino, and Ennio decides he's going to buy up half the town. Bob wants to give him all the gold. He's already getting a factory out of it anyway. And that's pretty much where it ends.
Yep. Electric Bob goes to his next adventure, wherever that is.
Yep. I don't know. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's all right. More humor in this one than I think the other ones.
Yeah, there's some speculation by Nevins and Bleiler that these are parodies of the regular Edisonauts.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go that far. It just didn't strike me as parody. I mean, there are touches of humor for sure, but I didn't get the sense that he was playing with the conventions of the genre in the same way that a Mark Twain would do.
No, it wasn't really clever enough to be that. It did sort of I don't know. It made some points about like Enio's avariciousness and how like silly it was that he was so not into the whole thing and wanting to go home and complaining the whole time. Right. But then as soon as he saw all these gold, he's just like he couldn't help himself. He's throwing himself in it like he's a kid in a swimming pool or something like that. Just, right. Gold! And yeah. He's kind of losing his mind. And I thought something was going to come out of that too. Like I thought he was going to do something really stupid and almost get them killed or something. But no. So, I mean, the whole thing is like, it's kind of badly put together. Like, there's just...
Yeah, it doesn't flow.
No, and there's just encounter after encounter with various bands and animals.
Yeah.
And then, like, it's kind of like the original Steam Man in that sense, I guess.
Right.
It doesn't really seem to have a... There's no real central conflict or anything. Like, the gold is just to get gold.
Right.
And then obstacles they encounter along the way don't really have any meaning to them. It's just, you encountered a band. It actually reminds me of, like, that old game, Oregon Trail.
Yeah, right.
What especially reminded me of that personally was that when I was a kid, I had this weird version of Oregon Trail where whenever you had to shoot something, it would flash a word on the screen, and you had to type in that word, like, quickly and accurately.
Yeah, right.
So the word was bang or wham. Yeah. Or pow, or blam, and you never knew which one it was going to be. The reason it reminds me of that is that a lot of the time when somebody fires a rifle or they use a machine gun, he'll write bang.
Yeah, you get the sounds.
It's just, and bang, the machine gun went.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know.
Yeah, no, this one also, like the last one, it's short, so it doesn't really have the time to get tedious in a way that it could if it was twice as long.
Yeah. Way New Steam Man did.
Right, yeah. I don't know. It was okay. It's not the greatest, but it wasn't really like painful to read, I don't think.
No, this was probably the least pain. I had a little trouble getting through Sea Spider because there was a lot of OCR errors, especially towards the end.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of like, and I kind of was struggling with it, and it was just like, it was better written in a lot of ways than this, but this, at least, it was fast paced. It had humor to it. The dialogue was actually kind of funny.
Right.
There were some good, like, little jokes, and I don't know, the relationship between Enio and Bob, although it seemed kind of random because they never really knew each other before this expedition started.
Right.
At least that was the sense that I got.
Yeah.
But by the end, Enio was calling Bob old friend and stuff like that.
Yeah,
they'd known each other for decades. It's weird. And again, I don't know how old Bob was supposed to be. Like, nobody said at some point, "Hey, man, you're a kid. Like, get out of here." Right?
Yeah. Yeah, so who knows? I don't know. Maybe he is supposed to be 10. You never know.
Yeah, it's an odd one. It's fine. Like, again, if you're historically interested in these things, you could do worse than to read this.
Sure.
I'm not really recommending it, though. But
no.
Again, like, for historical research purposes, go for it.
Yeah. And certainly the image of a 30-foot ostrich running through the desert at 80 miles an hour is a pretty good mental image.
And I hope you all enjoyed that summary, because that was kind of fun to do, actually. So, yeah. We're not doing any real quotations from these. Sometimes like to do the odd dramatic reading and stuff. And
these stories don't really fit, I don't think.
No. No. It feels sometimes too much like an endorsement, too, of the kind of things that they propagate.
Yeah.
So having said that, I think it's time to move on to something a little bit different.
Yes.